You get to start.
Are you all set up?
I am.
Do you have your clothes on?
Is that necessary?
For me, yes. I like knowing that you're clothed, even if I can't see you.
Are you decked out in full Klingon garb?
That's right.
All right. Well, then yes, I'm dressed. If it makes you feel better, I'll tell you that.
You wouldn't lie to me, would you?
Over podcast? Never. For the integrity of our listeners, I have never lied once to you or them about anything, ever.
Right. I like that you give the caveat, making it even more credible of a statement. Over podcasts? No. As you know, this is The Measure of an Episode, where it is our continuing mission to explore what makes Star Trek genuine Star Trek, and not just a reference show for Star Trek. And I don't say that snarkily.
No.
I say that
Huge
esteem
appreciation.
and reverence.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm Paul.
And I'm Jonathan. And we do this using 3 criteria. The first one is there science fiction that is used within the plot in a solid, immovable way? Is that sci-fi presented in a unique or novel manner? And is there a moral or ethical dilemma that a character must face throughout the episode? I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Paul. And this week, like everybody else in the Star Trek universe, we watched Lower Decks, Season 3, Episode 4, Room for Growth. And the blurb.
Always the blurb.
Always the blurb. I'm going to blurb myself. Mariner, Boimler, and Tendi clash with their arch rivals, the Delta Shift. The Cerritos engineers go on mandatory relaxation leave. So I have to ask, now that just because I said Delta Shift, so is that a reference? You know how last episode I said that everything is a reference to me? Like I go into reference overload.
Right.
I have reference anxiety when I watch the show. And so there's this whole thing about the Delta Shift and how Mariner, Boimler, and Tendi are on the Beta Shift. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, do you remember Chain of Command? We watched Chain of Command.
Yeah.
Where Captain Meany, I don't remember his name. We're going to call him Captain Meany.
Sounds great.
Who I know has been on this season. He's been referenced this season. And I still can't remember his name. So Captain Meany tells, not Archer, 'cause that would be weird.
You're saying meanie, like he's mean. I was hearing Mimi, like a name, M-I-M-I.
Oh. That made more sense to you?
No, I was just going with it. Like, Meanie makes a lot more sense, but just I love that you were calling him Captain Meanie. Like,
yeah, Captain Meany tells Commander Riker, no more of this 3-shift crap. We want 4 shifts. I'm getting that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the other way around. Okay.
No.
Yeah. So is that a reference? The fact that there are 4 shifts and not 3?
No, for 24 hours, there's the choice between those. There's no reference. That is a real life thing.
Oh, well, I'm shocked that I pointed out the one thing in this show that probably isn't a reference yet again.
Right.
I just want to know, is this a thing? Like, did at some point Captain Meany, did he rise the ranks at the Federation or Starfleet and say, no, we're all doing 4 shifts now?
Right. Well,
I make everybody.
Right.
Everybody.
Yeah, he was Admiral. That was the scroll in the first episode. So that is entirely possible that he had enough influence.
He's Admiral Meany now.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that's reference number 1. Check.
Right.
Okay, I have another question about this episode.
Okay.
And that happened right away. There's this weird, dark musical sting at the very top of the show.
Oh, okay.
Like we're walking into something that's already having gone bad.
Right.
Were
did.
you conscious of it? Well, but they were very casual about it.
Yes.
Right? It's not like they were screaming and running down the hallway tearing their clothes off.
No. Yeah, but they were talking
preparing
about
for a podcast.
Right, they were running late.
Yeah.
But they did talk about how busy the Cerritos has become, and so it seemed like they were war fatigued, where they've seen so much that it didn't even faze them anymore.
Right. It was just weird. It was a strange, I know that you need the onboarding with music. You can't just show up and have there be no music. This isn't Breaking Bad.
Right.
It just was an odd, because it was a typical sting of less than 5 seconds type of thing, or they mix it out or something like that.
Right.
So it just struck me as weird because I know that the spirit of Manuki becomes a player, which that is a reference. Don't tell me that is not a reference. That is a reference. I got that one.
I wonder how long I could keep that up. Like, no,
No,
it's not a reference.
It happens everywhere. Yeah.
Just masks that take over your body. That's just kind of a trope at this point.
In a 24-hour day, that's just going to be inherent to a 24-hour day. Is the spirit of Manuki.
You just expect it at this point.
Now, was it the same mask?
I don't think it was. Well, no, it was not the same mask, and I don't think it's the same culture either. I think it was just, because they were talking about, like, was she possessed by any strange artifacts? And they're like, well.
Okay, I have a question. I have another question.
Okay.
I asked this like you've seen more of the show.
I know.
that I have.
Right.
But it seems like that, I know I said reference show at the beginning, kind of offhandedly. Mm-hmm. But it kind of is a reference show because it doesn't seem like at any point they ever explore that.
Right.
Like the show wasn't about the spirit of Manuki.
No, not at all. Yeah.
It was just sort of something that happened in the background.
It was actually very similar to, I want to say Quantum Leap, but Sliders is a little bit better because Quantum Leap always ended with the tag for the next episode or led in from the tag from the last episode or the closer from the last episode. And Sliders had them start the episode leaping from a planet that we saw nothing about. They're like leaving some kind of crazy thing, like all the ice caps had melted and so they were sitting on a buoy, or the dinosaurs never went extinct so they were running from them, and they leaped into the next world, and that's where the story took place. So that was kind of like this, where we're catching the tail end of this great adventure, this great problem that they had to solve, and they're going into this episode.
That's how most action adventure movies start. If you think of Mission Impossible or Indiana Jones or any of those types of things, that's the fun way to start something because you can have fun with it and not have to explore it. And that's what they did with Captain Manuki.
Yeah.
But my point is that it's, we've talked about how we wish that some of the topics or plot lines or characters in Star Trek, specifically Next Gen, we wish they had explored more.
Right.
And they never do. That's never really happened.
Yeah.
They don't really revisit stuff, except in this show, except they don't really revisit it. They just sort of say, hey, we know this is here.
Right. They just kind of nod to it. Yeah. They acknowledge that it's part of the world, which it's nice. I feel like it's nice because if you've never seen, like if Lower Decks is your introduction to Star Trek, it just feels like a very rich world where all of these things are things. It's like, oh my gosh, there's so much going on. Where if you have watched Star Trek, you know where all this stuff is coming from. But you don't, again, like we talked about before, you don't feel lost watching this episode if you've never seen any other episodes of Star Trek.
I can imagine it being overwhelming, though. If you're just seeing all these random things and you're saying, yes, I'm sure this was some sort of reference that I missed because I haven't seen Star Trek. Like, I want to know how many people have had their introduction to Star Trek through this show. Right. Like it's got to be close to zero.
I would love it if there was one person who got their introduction to Lower Decks through us. Like, not that they hadn't heard of it, because obviously if they're listening to this podcast, they're Star Trek adjacent at the very least.
If you've never heard of Star Trek and you listen to this podcast, I want to know how you got here. Please email us. We'll give you $5. Right. We'll give you $10.
And why are you still listening? Like, oh, this Star Trek thing seems, I don't know what it is, but they seem to enjoy it.
But please tell me more.
Right. But yeah, I would love it. It's kind of the same thing. If there is one person out there who was not watching Lower Decks and decided to start watching Lower Decks because of our podcast, let us know.
We'll pay you $10.
Yeah. Why more?
Why more?
Yeah.
Okay, then $15.
All right, $20. That's the lowest I'm going.
Well, there was a comma, an implied comma. Why more? Or why more? That's what it is. Yeah. Why comma more?
Right. Just as in
why?
Why? Of course I would.
Me.
Yeah. Why more? Right.
So anyway, I just wish that they would go into some of these things as opposed to them just being references, truly references.
Yeah.
I want them to explore. I mean, I don't really care about the spirit of Manuki at all. In fact, I dread the day that we watch that episode of Next Gen.
I've never seen it, so I'm so looking forward to it.
Yeah, you say that. It's like saying I'm so looking forward to watching the Star Trek prequel, not Star Trek, Star Wars prequels.
Right.
And then you get it, 15, 20 minutes into it. And it's like, well, that's completely evaporated.
How much more of this?
What did I sign myself
Right.
up for? So another thing occurred to me on the show, that it's kind of implied when they're walking around the ship, because they go on an adventure in the bowels of the ship. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of implied that the ship is treacherous if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't know where to go, if you don't know how things work, that this is not a kid's adventure, in the sense that the people in Star Trek and the Star Trek universe and the Federation, these ships are not there sort of as just easy drive things where you can just kind of tell the computer where to go and it goes there. Mm-hmm. It's kind of expressed in this episode that these ships can actually kill you if you don't know what's going on. Like, you have to be a highly trained person. It kind of, you remember the Star Trek Next Generation episode we watched where they pick up 3 or 4 hibernated humans from the 1980s?
Yeah.
And that's why they keep them in that room, because you can actually like kill yourself with this ship.
Right. If you don't know what's going on. Right.
If you don't know like what buttons to push and where to go. I mean, they take it to the nth degree with the swamps and the dolphins and things like that. But I like the idea that these are not like, these are real. This is like a regular naval ship on the water. You can't just walk in there and be okay because, the technology won't let me die.
Right.
Or this is an advanced civilization. How would I be able, why is anything treacherous? That's not the way it is. Like, space travel is a treacherous act, and you need very sophisticated ships and technology to get through it. And even then, you might get attacked by the spirit of Manuki.
Right. Well, and when they were in the hydroponics lab, there was a skeleton in there, which was curious.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, like in the establishing shot of the hydroponics area, there was just a skeleton sitting in there. So, just proving how deadly this ship can be.
Yeah, I like that. It's kind of nice. I kind of wish this was a 45-minute. What would this show be like if it was twice as long?
Well, yeah, would they fill it with more content, like actual substance of a plot, or would they fill it just with more jokes? Yeah.
I would think the jokes would just get old.
I don't know. What episode is this? Episode 4? Yeah.
4.
I really enjoyed this episode just with all of the little one-liners. Like, Phillips, I think his name is. I don't tell a doctor how to hypo hairspray.
Right.
I just love how that acknowledges, like, as an engineer, he doesn't know anything about the medical side of things.
Absolutely nothing.
Right.
Right? Zero. He hasn't even seen the show.
Right.
Yeah. I wonder if there are writers, and the writers of the show, is there sort of a descending hierarchy of people who are familiar with Star Trek, or are they all kind of just as familiar with Star Trek and just as nerdy about it?
Right. I have to believe that there is a hierarchy. There is that writer who's either terrible or, he's okay, but he knows so much about Star Trek that they use him as a point of reference. Since there's, no search engine or one source where they could find the information.
I feel like we would be the perfect writers on this show. Not because we're great writers, but in terms of our knowledge of Star Trek, I feel like we're a good subsection, a good median of how much information to know to be referenceable. Because
I don't think so, because I can't draw on it at the drop of a hat. You
don't have to draw it. Like, you're just a writer. They have people that do that.
Especially drawing on hats? Like, what are you talking about? Like, why?
You know nothing about animation.
But yeah, like, I would not think to reference Masks or there was another episode. Like,
remember that cartoon, Masked?
Yeah, with the Transformers knockoff.
That's the only thing I know about Mask, is that it existed at one point.
Or the movie. There's the movie Mask.
Oh, right. That's The Mask, though.
No, not The Mask. Mask with Cher.
Oh.
And the guy who was supposed to be Marty McFly. What's his name? Eric Stoltz.
Yeah. Nice.
Eric Stoltz with he had huge facial prosthetics. You don't remember this movie?
Oh, right.
Okay.
That's right. This wasn't the Elephant Man.
No.
movie. Was it?
No. But he did die at the end. I remember. That's the only thing I remember about that movie is Cher like laying over his bed and crying.
And that's why he couldn't do Back to the Future?
Because he was dead? Yeah, that's a big problem. How do we get
why.
here? What happened?
Yeah, this is why. Well, I feel like maybe we're not the writers, but they would turn to us and say, do you remember this reference? Would be like, yeah, hey, I do remember that. And then be like, all right, we're putting it in. But if they run by something that's totally weird and obscure, they're like, I don't really remember that. Then we're like, we won't put it in, right?
Yeah, but I think also that's the reason why we shouldn't do it, because there are things in there where, like the deleted scene from the last episode, that called back to those rock creatures. Like, there's no way I would know that.
Right, but that's because we're not in the room yet. Like, that wouldn't be in the episode if we were in the room and they asked us, do you remember this thing?
Okay, so you want us to be there to dilute it?
Well, no, we're concentrating it for optimal reference appreciation.
No, this goes back to my brothers and the Halloween costumes. Like, I like, I mean, just in general, but for this show in particular, like, I like having to do the research and finding out where these cuts are coming from, and it's so much fun to not only do the research, but to be like, to learn that about the Star Trek history.
Yeah, it's an Easter egg hunt. It's like a little escape room. It's an escape room of Star Trek proportions.
Right. And it's just a question of how deep do you want to go? Like, you can just enjoy the episode for what it is. You don't need to know those references to know what's going on. But if you want to look into it, to try to figure out where everything came from, it's really fun.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. So we wouldn't be good in the writer's room. I still would want to go, though.
Yeah. No. I think that we would be good to show, like, whether or not the reference is worth it. But I don't think we'd be good as, do you get that reference?
I'm sure all of the people in the writer's room are, at some level, a Star Trek nerd. I don't think you could be hired on this show and not have that. I can't imagine there just being a comedy writer that worked on American Dad and came over to this show. I just can't imagine. And knows nothing about Star Trek. There's no way.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll move on from that. We don't have to be in the writer's room.
No? All right. I'll delete that email then.
You can't undo a sent email. Actually, you can in Gmail for like 15 seconds. But anyway, there's this low gravity scene where they make it into the gravity place.
Anti-grav.
Where are they?
Based on everything that was happening, they were in some kind of cog for the deflector shield.
Oh, that's right, because it spins for some reason.
I love that scene because first off, they earned everything that happened in there through last season. There was an episode where they got hit with the spores, I think, from the Naked Time and the Naked Now. No, is that it? There was something that happened where Boimler winds up full on goatseeing, if you know what that is, to the camera, and it's become like a meme all over the place. So they've had Boimler already exposed graphically, sexually. So to have these two characters drop down to their skivvies to have some kind of tether, and it's a callback to the Abrams Star Trek movie. And it was just great that, like, you can't really call them out for being misogynistic because they've already done something far worse to, like, the nerdiest boy.
Yeah, I did feel very random that they just got down to their underwears.
Yeah.
Yeah. It felt very intentional. It didn't feel like this is just a matter of fact.
Well,
I was wondering about that.
I liked the speed in which, they didn't hunt for a tether. They were like, we have these items right here that we can tie together. And I feel like it's faster doing it this way than trying to hunt for some kind of rope or cable that we can use in this area.
Yeah. And there isn't a shut-off switch in case you're in there, There's not like when you're at the gas station.
Oh, I'm sure
there
is.
There's a shut-off switch.
Right, I'm sure there is. But they didn't want to be caught.
Right. Yeah.
But just everything about that scene just tickled me just right. Like, the way that she got him by, like, grabbing onto his hair.
They just have to start pulling.
Yeah.
He just basically gets beat up the whole show.
Oh, I know.
Right?
Yeah.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I was talking about, though. Like you were talking about all the references they were making last season, etc., and about the Naked Now and the Spores, whatever.
Right.
That it seems like the show seems to nest itself in the wake of all of the different shows in terms of, okay, this happened in Next Gen, so there's like this, the wake of that Naked Now or the wake of that Spirit of Manuki is going to kind of float past us, and we're going to have to, do something with it. I wish they would just go into it. You know what I mean? Go into some of them.
Right.
Make an episode about one of those things. And I don't think that's the mission statement of the show, but that would be exactly what we want in terms of a show. Because right now it's, as we've talked about, it's very joke forward,
Yes.
as it should be.
So that's kind of, that kind of segues into whether or not I think it's a proper Star Trek episode. And like I'm sitting on the fence because it really is just it's Rat Race, if you remember that movie. Just with 2 groups instead of 15, but all of the things that they did were very sci-fi, but they didn't have to do those things to get through the plot. Like it was just kind of what the blurb says. Like the Delta team and the Delta shift and the Beta shift are fighting to get to a place first, and they go through obstacles to get there. Those obstacles could have been anything. It was the Shattered episode of Voyager. Like they could have gone through any rooms that were not sci-fi related. All of those rooms were sci-fi, but they didn't have to be.
Yeah, you're right. I guess I just want it to be a little bit more focused. It feels very kind of blurry in the background. You know what I mean? Like, for example, this whole low gravity scene. It could have been something that they explored, because when there's gravity pockets in something like that. Like, for example, okay, so let me go to real life. In real life, they're saying you can create artificial gravity if you just spin something. So if you're on the outside using centrifugal or centripetal, one of those doesn't exist. You can Google it later. But, if you spin something, it's pretend gravity, where it's kind of sort of forcing your feet into the end of the thing that you're spinning, and that kind of feels like gravity. The problem with that is the amount of perceived gravity is different at your feet than it is at your head. And so even if you were, even just through the course of walking, you would be experiencing different versions of gravity or different intensities of gravity. And it just would make everybody vomit all the time, right? It's not the same thing as when you're on Earth, where gravity is pretty consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you go up and down, you go farther away from the Earth on an airplane, more or less, it is the same amount of gravity. Not the case in these centripetal
One of
forces.
Those,
Yeah. But it would have been fun if it wasn't just sort of this, they were like a playground, but that being in this, like, it sort of affected them in some way, in the way that artificial gravity would.
Right.
Instead it was just sort of a playground and they were kind of having a moment. That's fine, but it
was very Willy
their
Wonka.
moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I mean, up to and including the blades. He gets slammed into it, and they've got to figure out how to get him out. I mean, obviously, the method is totally different. They're not like, burp, but...
What a reference that would have been. Wow.
But I did like the callback to Bold Boimler in this episode as well.
Yeah, well, that was just the previous episode, or was that 2 episodes ago? I don't remember.
I think it was 2 episodes ago.
It's been so long.
I know.
And I like that he's sticking with it,
Right.
In true next-gen fashion, it was merely just a reference to the previous episode. It wasn't, it was a callback. That's all it was.
Yeah.
So you talked about being tickled in this scene. I loved every single time. I think they did it 2 or 3 times where somebody gets slapped in the face, and the sound effect is just it's the perfect sound effect. It is when she grabs Boimler's head to pull him out of the centrifuge or whatever's happening. And it's like it shouldn't have even happened, but it was like the perfect, like, whatever that thing is.
Right.
Like that, it's just that little bit more of abuse for Boimler, right? That he didn't deserve. And I think the other one happens to, who's the big, huge Bajoran? Who's like security?
Shax, I think his name is.
Yeah, he gets slapped in the face from the guy with the bald head.
Yeah,
he's like the
Phillips,
engineer
yeah.
guy.
Mm-hmm.
Just not unnecessary,
Right.
Completely unnecessary. It just made me laugh.
Yeah, this episode had a lot. I definitely chuckled more in this episode than I have with any of the other episodes so far. I really enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, I like this better than the last one.
Yeah,
for sure.
And I don't know if you caught it or not, but the hostess for the spa ship is the same alien that took over Chekhov's point in the same alien race that took over Chekhov's point in the animated series.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Another deep cut.
Right? Yeah. I mean, definitely a callback to the animated series. And if you watched it, then you knew right away. And if you didn't, then it was just another alien in Star Trek.
So for most people, it was just another alien in Star Trek.
For sure.
She actually looked very Star Wars. Very Star Warsian to me.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that.
Yeah. So there's a point where the captain gets super pissed because she's working for, or she has a bunch of Geordie LaForges working for her.
Yes.
She says that.
She said, yep.
And that struck me strange because they don't really play Geordie as being this super workaholic. Yeah. He's actually, what we see most of him doing, half and half. Half he's in the engineering bay doing stuff, right?
Right.
The other half, he's on the holodeck. He's in 10 forward. He's in his quarters. Mm-hmm. He's doing a bunch of stuff. You know what I mean? Like I feel like he's not somebody who we always see in engineering.
Right.
Right?
No, if anybody, it would be
funny.
B'Elanna.
B'Elanna.
Torres.
Oh, right. Yeah. I totally blanked on that name.
I mean, yes, he just kind of worked half and half, but she wouldn't know Torres. She would know LaForge because he's on the flagship. And I feel like everybody in Starfleet would know who's on the Enterprise at any time.
That's true, but would she not know? Like, where is Voyager right now in the course of Lower Decks? Is Voyager back?
I don't think so, because this takes place just a few years after Enterprise ended.
You mean Next Gen? Or
Sorry,
Enterprise?
Next Generation. Yeah, Next Gen.
Can we, is there anybody who can confirm that with star dates and stuff? They don't ever really say star dates in this show like they do in the other ones.
They do.
But it's not like they open every show with star date,
right,
19,000. I don't want to know that. Because you're right, it totally should be B'Elanna Torres.
But
she's
not.
The workhorse.
Right.
But it's not.
But what was your point? So she gets all stressed.
That was my point.
Oh.
It's like, why Geordie LaForge?
Oh, okay.
He's not considered. Maybe that's just, if anything, it should be a Scotty, because he was the one who said that he says he's working a lot, but in fact, it's just a lie.
Well, but I mean, that's what we know from him. I don't think Starfleet knows that.
That's true. That's a good point.
So you're right.
Another thing that made me laugh is all the bleeped swearing.
Uh-huh.
They seem to balance that really well in the show. They're not always swearing and bleeping it out because that would get boring.
Right.
But they always find those token 2 or 3 times where they say it and they leave in just enough of the real word to make it funny.
Uh-huh.
There's like an art form to bleeping swearing.
Right.
And you can't just bleep the whole thing because then it's just, well, what do they say?
Yeah.
You gotta leave the little in there.
Mm-hmm. There is an episode of some sitcom. I don't know which one it is. My brother knows. But they actually didn't bleep the word at all. It cuts to a commercial break. And
that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I like that. Yeah.
So he goes, "Fuh," and then it cuts to a commercial and it comes back and he goes, "Uck."
I was going to say, they did that a little bit in She-Hulk where she's about to swear.
Right. Captain America, fuh. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, good for you, Disney.
Right?
You got some hair on your balls now.
They've also got hair on their ass if you've ever seen Splash, the one on Disney Plus. But
oh, really?
Yeah, you should go check out that last scene where Daryl Hannah's running away. They did a number on her hair.
So speaking of detail, one of my favorite details that they do, and I want to know, where does this detail come from? Is it in the script? Is it the animators or the drawers, whatever the pipeline is? But when Ransom gets his bag of churros, there is like a little greasy line.
Right at the bottom of it? Yep.
Yeah. And obviously that's somebody who has had their fair share of churros. Whoever.
Sure, right.
You know.
Yeah.
But where does that lie? Is that in the script? Ransom grabs his bag that is stained with grease at the bottom of it.
Right.
Does that start there? Or is that a great idea somewhere down the line?
Just in the inker, in the person who colored it.
Right. It could have been his idea, but it could have been already there.
Right.
It could have said, we need
But that's
to
what I'm
stain
saying. Like, it could have been in the script, or it could have just been literally the last minute. Somebody was like, oh, hang on, and just shaded that area just a little bit darker.
Yeah. But that's the kind of detail I like.
Mm-hmm.
I like that kind of stuff.
But having said that, it doesn't make sense. Like, it's just been replicated, and that means it was replicated to have a slightly greasier base in the bag.
That's very interesting. So technically, what should have happened is it replicated clean and then immediately started kind of greasing up. Right?
Yeah. That would have been good.
I can't remember if this was something that he pre-programmed or if he just asked for it. Was this Ransom greasy churro bag number 2 program or something like that?
Right. No, he did ask for like 30 churros in a unmarked brown paper bag. Like, he gave the specific descriptions for it. So it was not a, Ransom number 7.
Right. Makes you wonder what 1 through 6 are.
Right.
Yeah. So I just like that kind of detail.
Yeah.
I like it when it happens. So I don't know if this is a Star Trek episode.
Right.
I don't think it is.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think that it, again, fully immersed in the Star Trek world, and absolutely watch it if you're a Star Trek fan, but it doesn't hit the criteria.
No, I can't even make it work.
Right.
Really. They just don't do it, which is fine. I mean, this is the animated Star Trek show, right?
Right.
The modern animation.
Yeah, it is very much for Star Trek fans. I feel like Strange New World and Lower Decks are for Star Trek fans, for the same Star Trek fans, but for completely different reasons.
Right. I think they do in Strange New Worlds what we want them to do in this show. They just are choosing not to.
Right.
Which is truly explore all these different weird things that are happening.
Yeah.
I feel like it's happening a lot where they're running into adversaries, and they are forced to sit with these adversaries for a certain amount of time. They become friends, and then something else happens. We never see them again in the show.
Oh, you're right.
And, I want to know, is this going to be the show? Like, has this been the show through seasons 1 and 2? Maybe we should watch seasons 1 and 2.
I think we should, but unfortunately, I don't think we'll get to it before season 3 ends.
You're probably right. It's a very good point, and you're probably right. But, yeah, we'll see. I mean, we're kind of getting our education. Like when you would walk into class in high school, 15 or 20 minutes late for whatever reason, and you just could never catch up.
Yeah.
No matter what was happening, you were always late to the party in a bad way.
Right.
And it just might as well not come to the class.
Yeah.
That's how it feels.
Right. Your choice is to miss everything that's being taught because you're trying to catch what you missed in the first 15 minutes, or to just write down everything that's being told you without learning any of it because you missed the first 15 minutes.
Well, it's somehow, even if you were 10 minutes late, they somehow managed to cram in an hour and a half worth of knowledge on how to do something, whatever the subject was for the day. And now everyone's just practicing the thing that you missed on how to do.
Yeah.
High school was hard.
It was hard. But it's done. Long since passed.
No, it's still with me. Okay, so not a Star Trek episode. That's okay. Or no, sorry. We always say that. I hate it. Not a genuine Star Trek episode.
Yeah, not a proper Star Trek episode, but a really good one.
Yeah. Okay, well, what are we watching next, Jonathan?
Star Trek. It's going to be Lower Decks this time. Season 3, Episode 5, TBA.
Okay. Well, I've been Paul.
I've been Jonathan.
And this has been The Measure of an Episode.
I don't know which way to go. But you already knew that.
See, we're just doing gruff, growly voices
I know.
now.
All right, fine. Let me do it, everyone. I'll go in the other direction of what I was going to do.
Who are you doing?
Don't worry about it. Oh, but you already knew that.
Oh, that was good.
Who was it?
Was that the bird guy?
Damn it. No. So it was not good.
Well, I mean, I'm not the right person to be.
No, my co-host is not the right person.
Well, I don't know the show.
They were on this episode.
Is this someone from our life? Or is this from the show?
From this episode, from all episodes.
Is it Tendi?
We're just going to leave it at that and see if the audience can figure it out.
So no, audience. Spoilers.